Hi guys! Today we'll be recapping a story called The Grand Duke is Mine. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot. Enjoy! A man begins to panic after learning of the failure of his plan. He plans his escape, but before he does so, he starts thinking of getting rid of his most useless baggage, his wife. He approaches his wife, Ignat, tricking her into drinking the wine he's offering. She knows he's lying, but she isn't in a position to refuse her husband. Immediately, Ignat starts to feel her body seething with pain. Her husband smirks, casting her away like she's nothing. Heartlessly, he offers consolation. Since she did help grow his business, she will at least have his condolences. What a heartless, ugly man! Suddenly, a man clouded in shadows appears behind him, asking if he's the head of the Baron Merchant Group. Before he can even turn around, the man slashes him with his sword, claiming his life on the spot. Fighting for her life, Ignat realizes that the other man is Heinz Ascalon, her Grand Duke, the victor of the war and now the new king of the Baron Empire. Ignat tries to get a good look at Heinz, but she can barely make out his features. She finally meets him after years of waiting, but now she doesn't even have the strength to look at him properly. As she slips into an endless slumber, she can only recall the events 8 years prior. 8 years ago, Ignat was married to the Grand Duke Heinz Ascalon. However, with his recent designation to the front lines of the Black Forest War, Heinz opted to send a proxy in his place. Ignat's parents sought to do the same, and Ignat was forbidden to attend her own wedding. In her room, she reflected on her past, the loneliness she was feeling, and the indifference she experienced from her family. Maybe that's why she became so obsessed with being the perfect future Grand Duchess, because perhaps then someone would love her. Heinz was supposed to be her only hope and escape from her current misery. Ignat spent her days reading, learning, and waiting. One day, Lena excitedly barged into her room, informing her that her parents, the Duke and Duchess Herkia, were talking about Heinz. A spark of hope reignited within Ignat. Could he finally be taking her away? She happily came running to her father's office as soon as she was summoned, anticipating the good news. However, the news she received broke her entirely. Her father had arranged and finalized a divorce behind her back. She was no longer going to be wed to the Grand Duke Ascalon. It turns out the reason her father is so adamant on her divorce is because Heinz had stopped sending money for her monthly allowance. Due to this, her father had seen it fit to end her marriage. Hearing this, Ignat is angered. She didn't even know her family was milking Heinz like that. Ignat realizes that she dedicated her whole life to being the perfect Grand Duchess. Not once did she ever ask for anything else. But now it all crumbles over money. Not having anything to her name, she's left with no choice but to remarry. Finally, on the verge of what would be her third wedding, Ignat overhears Lena, her loyal maid, begging her father not to continue the marriage. Duke Herkia becomes furious. How dare a mere servant interfere in her master's affairs? Lena takes a direct hit on the head, rendering her still and cold. Ignat runs to her in a fit of agonizing screams. Seeing her there, her father only reprimands her, threatening she'll endure the same if she doesn't obey him. Ignat snaps herself back to the present. She had lived the rest of her life obediently, but for what? Only to be laying in the cold, suffering, excruciating pain as she's about to slip into her eternal rest. With her last heave of breath, she vows not to be rid of so easily, not even in death. Ignat jolts awake, beaded with sweat, thinking she's in the afterlife. She looks younger and she's in her childhood room. Suddenly, a person barges in. Lena! She's still alive! Ignat then realizes that she's given a second chance at life. She's been sent back to the day of her wedding with Heinz, and this time, she won't let anyone ruin her life. Acting on her plans, she pays her father a visit in his office. She should at least attend her own wedding. She tries to reason with her father. In the event that the Grand Duke is able to pull strings and manage to attend his own wedding, it'd put the Herkia family in an awkward position if they push through with a proxy. Hearing her father immediately agrees. Back in her quarters, Ignat reminds herself that she must accept that her love for her family is one-sided, and that she must move on from trying to gain their affection. How else could she survive this second life? You go, girl! On the way to the wedding, Ignat's mother annoyingly remarks that there is no need to attend her own wedding. Weddings aren't special after all. Ignat realizes that even if she knew how her parents truly felt towards her, she still couldn't help but feel sorry for herself. Upon their arrival, both Ignat and Duchess Herkia are welcomed by the priest. A handsome man with black hair and golden eyes stands on the sidelines. Curious, Ignat asks the priest if that man is the Grand Duke's proxy. The priest can only hope so, considering he has the seal of the 9 principalities. But with a face like that, I'm positive it is the Grand Duke himself, not a proxy. The man approaches Ignat and greets her, but they are barely able to have a conversation when Duchess Herkia approaches the man, arrogantly asking him to pass a message to the Grand Duke. She shamelessly tells him that the given dowry was a laughable amount. The man can only smirk. How heartbroken can the Duchess be to find 10,000 gold coins insufficient? A look of shock and humiliation displays on the Duchess's face. She was only ever informed that it was a mere 3,000 gold. Her husband must have pocketed the rest. Intervening, Ignat reminds her mother not to create a scandal for fear of her father's fury. The Duchess Herkia walks away, salvaging any dignity left within her. She turns to leave, telling Ignat she has no intention of staying the entire duration of the wedding. Finally, alone again, Ignat apologizes to the man. She lies that her mother's only upset that her eldest is getting married. As they are both ushered into a waiting room before the ceremony, Ignat asks the man a favor, to pass an important letter to the Grand Duke. She adds that in the event he responds, she'd prefer to receive it personally. Despite the lack of an explanation for her request, the man agrees promptly. Yet he is quite amused that she's so sure he'd respond. The two cut their conversation short. They have an important wedding to attend to after all. This time, she'll make sure to cling on to it. The Emperor of Baron has 2 sons, a weak older one and a selfish younger one. The Emperor split his kingdom in 2, the older one receiving the bigger portion while the younger one the smaller barren land. This infuriated the younger son, resulting in him poisoning his father, forging his will, and forcing his older brother to live in Nienore, the smaller barren land. Nienore was then reduced to merely a vassal state. Tyranny resulted in many consequences, the conquest of the Black Forest being one of them. In the present, the proxy arrives at the imperial camp, teleporting his way back after the wedding. This man pretending to be a proxy is actually Heinz Ascalon, the Grand Duke himself. One of Heinz's prized possessions is a magical sword imbued with sentience. The sword remarks that it can't access Ignat's mind, even when using its power. It has never encountered a human whose mind cannot be read except for Heinz. Heinz reflects back to his encounter with Duchess Herkia. Meeting her, the sword immediately reveals her true intentions, to drain Heinz of his riches. But Ignat doesn't resemble her mother at all. Not having any idea what Ignat is thinking of, it makes him become suspicious and wary of her. He then starts to look through her letter. Oddly, she details that her father would be requesting an allowance for her very soon. When he does, she asks Heinz to send the allowance directly to her. Looking at her second request, Heinz is amused. If Duke Herkia sends a divorce notice, he's to rip it up immediately. Suddenly, Kane, a man with cyan hair and a cheerful personality, enters Heinz's tent. He's come to report that Heinz is in the clear. His father has no clue he attended the wedding personally. Relieved, Heinz nods. Before he sends Kane away, he tasks him to investigate the Herkia family, including his new wife, Ignat. He really is wary of her, isn't he? The following morning, Ignat is set to visit the commercial district together with Lena and Grick. But Rosalie, her younger sister, suddenly comes running to her, feigning affection. She wants Ignat to join the patrons meeting and write her name on the attendance ledger. Despite Ignat's decline, Rosalie pays her no mind, expecting her to do as she's told. But as soon as Rosalie leaves, Ignat pushes through with her original plan. She's going to Rivertown. There's someone she needs to meet. Rosalie pisses me off because of how pretentious she is. In her past life, Ignat was forced to operate her third husband's merchant groups. The business became big, but no matter how hard she worked, nothing was left for her. Now, she promises to make things different. Ignat arrives at a small shop. She inquires if the place is up for sale. After learning that it is, she quickly purchases the property using her life savings. She used to frequent a temple and translate texts from the East, earning enough to save up a hefty amount. However, in her past life, her savings became of no use to her since her mother took it all away. Ignat reassures Lena that it is a significant investment. The property is in an excellent location for people to stop and notice. A little renovation and the shop is sure to attract crowds. Later on, Ignat asks her companions a favor. As soon as they arrive at the market, she plans to walk alone with a purse, luring Isaac Bakun, the person she wants to find. Lena strongly disagrees, but she knows she can't stop Ignat. Isaac Bey-kun comes from a long-gone noble family with exceptional talent. In Ignat's previous life, he was the only person who treated her with sincerity during her third marriage. Upon arriving at the market, Ignat starts executing her plan with Grick and Lena assisting her from afar. Several pickpockets go by and none of them is Isaac. But just when they are resting, a boy suddenly steals Ignat's purse and makes a run. Grick manages to catch Isaac, but he soon becomes livid, yelling about how desperation drove him to his current predicament. Isaac exclaims that they have no right to judge him until they've put on his shoes. Oh, poor boy. Ignat looks at Isaac sadly. She remembers him in her past life, telling her that if he is ever caught, he would want his captor to hold his hand instead of dragging him to prison, and that's exactly what Ignat does. In the present, Ignat extends her hand to Isaac, asking if he wants to work for her. For the first time in a while, Isaac feels hopeful. Isaac recalls how his family was murdered for a crime they didn't commit. He wallows in self-pity, questioning why he's the only survivor. Back then, he vowed to be indebted to whoever gave him the fortitude to stand up and exact his revenge. And it just so happens to be Ignat. Inside the carriage, Isaac has calmed down, but Ignat notices his guard is still up. Ignat exhales, directly voicing out Isaac's desire for revenge. How a stranger could have known that is beyond Isaac's understanding. Of course he wants revenge. Who wouldn't if they lost their entire family in one day? However, getting revenge requires power, something Isaac currently doesn't have. Ignat shows Isaac the property she bought, telling him he can prove himself to her by working and building his influence little by little. Hearing this, tears roll down Isaac's cheeks as he sobs. He will definitely prove himself to her. I'm happy that Isaac has been given a chance. As soon as Isaac leaves the carriage, Grick asks Ignat if she's serious about trusting Isaac, to which she agrees. Isaac may be young, but he has a clear goal and purpose. Once more, Ignat asks Lena and Grick a favor. Forget everything that they saw or heard today, as this would be a matter of life or death for Isaac. Without hesitation, Lena quickly agrees, but Ignat notices Grick's reluctance. Even in her childhood, she could tell that Grick isn't someone who'd betray. But does his loyalty lie with House Herkia or to her alone? Ignat tells him that a knight chooses who to be faithful to in a critical time. If he'd allow her, Ignat wishes for Grick to delay his decision. She doesn't want to pressure him into choosing her over House Herkia. Grick agrees, making Ignat beam with joy. Afterwards, Ignat, Lena, and Grick share a well-deserved meal after a long day, but suddenly they cross paths with Lady Lisa, who's been looking for Ignat for a while now. Ignat is taken aback at Lisa's offer. She wants her to become an interpreter. She tries to decline, but Lisa isn't having it. Lisa is sure that Ignat has the skills and talent for it, and it'll only be 3 hours of her time. Ignat notices that Lisa's need is dire, so she agrees to help her, earning her Lisa's gratitude. Heading back to the Herkia estate, all three suddenly stop when they see Ignat's family bonding without her. Seeing this, Lena sobs, feeling sorry for Ignat. Ignat gazes at her softly, reassuring her that it's all right. It's okay, Ignat. You don't need a manipulating and greedy family. You're better off without them. At the Imperial camp, Heinz reads the report about House Herkia. How could a man like Duke Herkia, who is cold and greedy, have a daughter like Ignat, who lacks in more ways than one? Aside from Ignat's appearance and her lack of resemblance to her parents, there isn't much more to be said about her. As Heinz reads the report, he notes that Ignat isn't as shy as the report lets on. Her expressions look hurt and sad, but for her to stand up to her mother, write him a letter, and make requests of him, he doesn't think she's shy at all. If his sword can't read her, he will have to figure it out himself. Until then, he'll continue acting as the proxy husband. Ignat stands before her balcony alone. However, she stiffens when Heinz suddenly appears. It seems that he has something, a reply from the Grand Duke. She excitedly reads the letter. She realizes that her current situation, of still being in House Herkia instead of being sent to Nianore to be with her husband, is all her father's doing. However, she feels glad that it wasn't the Grand Duke himself who wanted this arrangement. Heinz wants to understand Ignat's intentions clearer. He assumes she's curious about the Grand Duke, but is she only curious because they recently just married? Heinz tries his best to understand why the Emperor arranged for Ignat to be his wife. Sitting together, Ignat recounts all, if not just the notorious rumors about the Grand Duke. In turn, Heinz is a little annoyed to hear all those absurd things about him. However, what strikes him is that Ignat still married the Grand Duke despite knowing all that. He's becoming interested. Ignat replies that she's not one to give weight to rumors. Before she forgets, she asks Heinz to deliver a letter to the Grand Duke, or rather, a proposal. As Heinz returns to camp, he begins to be more suspicious of Ignat as he reads her letter. She seems to know quite a lot of things, including the mana stones nobody knows about. She asks him to give her mana stones as allowance instead of gold, but Heinz becomes unsettled at this. After all, mana stones are magical and can be wielded even by someone without supernatural abilities. He starts to think that there must be a snitch or traitor in his midst, someone who's ratting out precious information. But that can't be, otherwise Derain would have caught them by now. He grows in frustration. Does he really not have a choice about this? The following morning, Ignat ponders on her request. Mana stones are one of the reasons why the Grand Duke became the Emperor in her past life. To keep his possession of these magical stones a secret, he's sure to grant her request. Later that day, Ignat visits Marquis Carl unannounced, much to his dismay. She wants to do business with him by selling him a design, a doll that moves like a human. The Marquis gapes, amazed and in awe of the design. In her previous life, the Marquis spent his life obsessing on perfecting that design. When he did finish the doll, he succumbed to his health issues shortly after. Although it's a tad bit crude to sell him his own design, Ignat likes to think of it as a win-win. He lives a long and healthy life, and she profits. A sweet and smart gesture. At least he gets to enjoy his creation becoming a big thing. Looking at the design Ignat hands him, the Marquise tells her that most people know him as an avid doll collector, but he actually also enjoys making them. He had to hide that part of himself since no noble would ever choose such a profession. For him, dolls aren't just toys, they represent the meaning of life. He is so passionate about dolls. He directly asks Ignat to name her price. Ignat tells Marquise that she doesn't want money. Rather, she wants him to make a few of the dolls life-sized. The Marquise instantly realizes that she plans to sell clothes, making the dolls her mannequins. Additionally, she wants him to sell the dolls only to her for the next 3 years. Lastly, she wants to take one of his seamstresses to care for the dolls. When she was a child, Ignat's only friends were dolls, but she soon realized that dolls were stiff. They can't accommodate movement, making their dresses rip so easily. For fear of ruining her doll and its clothes, Ignat found herself playing with it less and less. Oh, I feel so sad for her. Soon enough, the Marquise leads Ignat to his seamstresses, and immediately she nitpicks from them. She takes a look at each seamstress's sample designs and notices one design that stands out. Her designs can accommodate movement. Ignat approaches the seamstress, Vanessa, asking her if she wants to work with her as a designer. Wide-eyed and honored at the opportunity, Vanessa happily agrees. Later that night, Ignat feels relieved that everything went according to her plan. As she passes the hallway, she notices that her father has a familiar guest. It's her second husband from her previous life. A chill runs down her spine. They can't be up to anything good. That night, she sneaks into her father's office, hoping to uncover the envelope her second husband gave her father. But when she finds it, she's in disbelief of its contents. At dawn, Ignat grasps almost tightly the paper in her hand. The letter reveals her father's secret deal with the Emperor, which she seems confused about. All this time she thought that her father's intentions towards her are for the best of his eldest daughter, but it turns out that Ignat is just a mere source of means to get him richer. This time, she finds out through another piece of certificate that mentions how her father will be receiving a dungeon of diamonds in exchange for Ignat's marriage with the Grand Duke. She thinks deeply as to the mysterious reason why she's being sold off to the Grand Duke with huge wealth. And all the more, she wonders what the Emperor gets out of this deal. As time passes by, she hears footsteps approaching her father's office, where she's currently sneaking in for these revelations. Panickingly, she looks around in a hurry to find a space where she can hide in, yet she fails out of panic, but a hand reaches out to take Ignat. Grick, her trusty guard, jumps down from the tree, holding Ignat tightly in his arms in a bridal carry. Ignat was almost caught in the act if it was not for Grick. So she thanks him for saving her as she asks him why he was able to do so. Girl, think of an escape plan before sneaking in. He explains that he actually saw her heading inside the office while on his roaming duties, and as his mind cannot go in peace without checking for her safety, he hid on top of the tree branches near the office window to guard her. In her room, she lies down on her bed feeling different emotions. She tries to refocus her mind on the Emperor's main reason why he's marrying his son to Ignat and what motive is behind all of what she had learned. Eventually, before she can doze off, she plans to ask the Grand Duke's proxy regarding the matter and apprehends when she can meet her husband soon. Contrarily, the Grand Duke and his army battle with savage mutants in the middle of the forest, locating every ounce of mana gems they can find. Knowing well that the mana gems give immense power to mutants, he tries to control the situation while his personal guard, Kane, complains about the Grand Duke being used by the Emperor. Nonetheless, being in the battlefield does not bother the Grand Duke at best. This is all too fishy. Why would you even need to suffer like this? You're way too gullible. Boo-hoo! Currently, he smirks at the sight of mana gems, wondering how his wife will use them once he delivers them to her. Another day passes. Lena expresses her happiness and joy to see that Ignit is now going in and out of her room compared to how she was before, always facing her books and letting them become her company every single day. Jubilant by this compliment from Lena, Ignit smiles widely as she tries to process how she's different now than before. Additionally, she had a meeting with Marquis Carl a while ago today to discuss some issues, so Lena is a bit concerned about Her Majesty's health. Then, Lena turns the lights off for Ignit to be able to rest, yet Ignit cannot let herself rest even a little. She stands to grab her book about the East, concerning herself with the knowledge she needs to gain and regain for the interpretation she has to do for Lady Lisa. She then plans to pace around the garden area, but as she looks through her glass window, the night has gone quite long and dangerous for her to be roaming around outside. Hence, she decides to pace around her room instead. And so she studies as much as everything about the East when a knock on her balcony door is heard. She flinches from this sudden and random knock at the most unexpected location of her room. She then looks at the direction of the balcony and sees the proxy that was present at her wedding. She opens the balcony door and asks the reason for his visit late at night. At some point, the ambiance changes between the two. They both agree on Ignit's condition to keep her communications with the Grand Duke a secret from her family. The Grand Duke, on the other hand, who pretends to be his own proxy, delivers his message to Ignit in the point of view of a proxy. He asks her why she's been pacing around her room and why she seems to be quite curious about the East. Ignit smartly shares about her efforts on being an accomplished duchess for her husband, and this momentous time is the reason both of them blushed. Before the night ends, the Grand Duke finally shows Ignit his purpose of visiting. From his pocket, he presents to her mana gems. Still acting as his proxy, he asks Ignit how she'll be using the mana gems, but unfortunately, she asks for more time before she can show him her plans for the mana gems. Patiently, he agrees to wait for her preparations to be completed, satisfied enough to see her glow with glee upon seeing the mana gems in his hands. And so, the next day comes. The Grand Duke is left frustratingly curious as to what she's up to as he rests his arm on his eyes to block it out from the bright sun. Still, he feels excited to know what she's really doing. The Grand Duke learns about what Ignit had found in the letter that the Emperor sent her father, although she did not dismiss where that information had come from and perhaps spoke to the Duke about it meticulously. This event is causing the Grand Duke to become agitated by the things he learned about his wife. The theory Ignit proposes is the idea of marrying his son to an intellectual noble in order to rule over the dukedom. Yet he appears to think that Ignit doesn't know she's also being used by those people. A statement she released that night about her wanting to be an accomplished duchess strikes an idea in His Majesty's mind. He thinks perhaps she just wants everyone to acknowledge and like her. This makes him more confused on what he truly feels about the possibilities. Meanwhile, on a sunny day, Ignit visits her newly reconstructed shopping space that she bought months ago. Lena then asks why Ignit has set covers in front of the shop. Before Ignit answers her curiosity, Isaac arrives and they all go inside to chat. Soon, Ignit mentions the covers in front and likes to let Lena or Isaac guess what the covers are for. Prior to that, she already knows that Isaac can make the correct answer since she took the idea from her past life, wherein Isaac suggested they do. He really has the wits. Nice thinking, Duchess. As expected, Isaac arrives with the right answer, and while discussing the needed preparations for the opening next month, Ignit appoints Isaac to lead the whole operation so as to prove himself. Fear comes across Isaac's face at first, but it changes with more determination, and so Ignit hands him 10 gold coins to supply him the necessary means to begin his new life. Late in the afternoon, Ignit comes home with Lena when a Herkia guard stops them. He then informs her lady that her mother forbids her to leave the premises and requests Ignit's appearance during dinner to meet a guest. She knows it is her uncle Nigel who displays indecencies at any occasion. Realizing how she's again being pawned by her own family, She snaps at the guard, telling him to address her properly as she's now married and her mother is no longer her guardian. Lena smiles proudly, knowing how much courage it took for Ignat to do this in a long time. Lena fears Ignat's situation when her mother did not allow her to leave the premises yesterday. Ignat then assures her that her mother is unlikely to be able to do so since she does not want to tarnish their family's reputation from any of their social circle. But still, Lena cannot shrug off the fear she feels about Ignat's life under her Herkia family. But when they were about to proceed to the magic shop, a uniquely outfitted man unleashes his sword in the middle of the community. Ah yes, a commotion before any good day. In an instant, Ignat turns her head as she hears him speak Eastern. Luckily, she has been studying the Eastern language for the requested interpretation she has been preparing for. Glad that someone can speak his language, he tries to explain his situation. His name is identified as Kahin, when a woman tried to steal his bag of coins and is proven to be his bag when Ignat finds a golden embroidery of his name inside the bag. Kahin thanks Ignat and asks if he can invite her for a meal as his thanks for the help. However, Ignat refuses the invite as she has to be somewhere else. While in the magic shop, Lena and Ignat are fascinated by how the gems turned into a different color after being enchanted. Suddenly, Kahin pops out of nowhere and tries to befriend his savior a while ago. Oh boy, you're being kind of suspicious, aren't you? Ignat does not want to be rude, also considering that he may be Lady Lisa's guest. So she asks him what he wanted, and he asks for her name and to help him find a present for someone he'll be seeing for a long time tomorrow. He even tells her that as much as he wants to give that important person something she likes, he cannot give her something she already has. Ah, I smell love right there. Kahin, sir? You are making me so curious. Who might be this important person? That person wanted to be with Kahin somewhere no one knows them, but Kahin cannot as she lives a different life here in this country. Hence, he recalls a distant memory when she liked a strawberry dessert, and Ignat leads him to a bakery. And before long, Kahin bids farewell, and Ignat suddenly feels foul knowing she has to head home. During dinner, Nigel and his sister Nivea dine together. Nigel seems to be growing more impatient as the clock moves forward, so he bluntly asks his sister about her children joining them today. Nivea, who clearly does not know the indecencies of her own brother, stressfully asks him to be more patient, as everyone in her family are busy with their own plans. However, this explanation does not sit well with the Baron. He reminds her of the crime she committed a few years ago when she pushed her half-sister to death so that she could replace her and marry the Duke, who is now her husband. Fear and anger show on her face as she can no longer stand her brother's coy and insolent remarks. She slams the table out of spite as she stops him from what he's saying. As if right on time, Ignat proclaims her arrival behind the dining room doors. As she enters, Nigel's face brightens up instantly, ready to harass his niece without the fear of Ignat telling on him. So he taps his thighs, signaling Ignat to sit on them so as to entertain her uncle. However, the strong Ignat does not let this pass, and reveals the times when Nigel told her to wear something that shows her cleavage or tried to coerce her into his carriage. Awful! Such primitive thinking unfit for his age and title! Boo! Nivea learns of this just today and questions her brother's behavior. Nivea can no longer take any of her brother's causations. But in a blink of an eye, Nigel's anger consumes him as he was about to slap Ignat. Grick immediately interferes before the Baron can even land his palm on the Grand Duchess's face. As Nivea asks Grick to accompany Ignat to her room, Ignat apologizes to Grick along the way for receiving the blow. He explains that it was his job to protect her and to intervene as per Lena's information about Nigel's visit too. Then, Grick asks her to make a promise. He asks her to promise not to involve herself in dangerous situations like such. Oh boy, can I hire Grick as my guard too? He's really a nice guy, you know? The promise that Grick wants the Grand Duchess to do is being refused by Ignat herself. With a sad but humble expression on her face, she explains how she cannot be involved as she may be weak right now, yet she has to keep up the fight or else she becomes even more powerless than she did before. Grick makes it all a bit better when he compliments how strong Ignat has already become. Night draws later. Ignat sees Nigel from her balcony, entering his carriage with a very angry expression while stomping his feet before coming into his ride. Ignat remembers that it is during these times of the night when the proxy comes to see her, but it seems like no one is coming tonight, so she attempts to write a letter to the Grand Duke. She clearly states her longing to see His Highness while adding to the letter her request to see him soon. She also included her loneliness. For her, it feels as though she's facing and fighting everything alone despite being married. Nevertheless, when she's about to end the letter, she complains out loud how she can even send the letter to the Grand Duke without a messenger. But in that instance, the Grand Duke, who is still acting as his own proxy, arrives with a gift. He opens the gift to show a necklace with a mana gem that resembles the emerald green colors of Ignat's eyes. She thinks it's a coincidence in color, thinking the Grand Duke has not seen her before. Expressing her heart, she reveals her frustrations of not knowing where the Duke is even located in that dark forest. So the Grand Duke patiently explains his current situation indirectly, just letting her know he is safe. However, as soon as Ignat shares with him about her encounter with Kahin, fire-burning emotions engulf him. How jealous can one be? He set his heart on fire before knowing everything. She was jealous of the girl who receives gifts and efforts from her lover, but now that she received a one-of-a-kind gift, she feels better. He smiles at this and leaves before the night deepens more. As he teleports back to the forest, he speaks with his sword as it teases him for all the effort he put to format green mana gems into a perfect emerald color to match Ignat's brilliant eyes. Today, Ignat arrives at the place where she'll be working as an interpreter for a client that she does not know about yet. Polkins, a butler that she has befriended, receives her at the front door so as to lead her to the main office where the meeting of the Easterner and the client will be assumed. However, as soon as the door opens, a foul expression forms in her mind. It was her forever grudged so-called mentor in her past life who works for Cath's merchant, Borgia. He would whip her every time she fails to provide solutions for the merchant group, or for the business, and threatens her of having the same fate as those of the past mistresses who died from the violence. It brings him joy to do such a thing, and looking at the current Easterner, Lady Arabelle, she can see her past self in the lady. She then greets Arabelle and asks her if she needs any help in Eastern language. Fearsome, Borgia intervenes to ask what Ignat is trying to do. She then explains how she is greeting as courtesy and good manners to the noble lady. She continues to communicate with Arabelle in Eastern language until Kahin comes into view. Right on her assumption, Ignat figures out that Kahin's important person was his sister, Lady Arabelle. And unfortunately, Kahin and his sister's moment is interrupted by Borgia. Ignat relays the message Borgia would like them to understand, and it is a question about the deal they were about to make. And almost precisely, the expression Borgia is showing certainly is familiar with Ignat. She thinks he's fooling Kahin into a trap. Ignat learns about this when she continues to interpret Borgia's conversation with the Easterners. She's determined to stop the deal all at once and save Kahin and Arabelle from such a sadistic person. In order to have more time to figure out what deal is happening, Ignat changes Kahin's answer from making the deal done the day before he leaves for the East to the morning of the day he leaves. Learning of so, Borgia's expression turns sour and he becomes more irritable while he explains how he only works for the merchant group and may have problems if not done sooner. Late in the evening, before Ignat can leave the premises, Polkins hands her a letter from Lady Arabelle. It is written in Eastern language that says if Ignat really wants to help, she has to stop Kahin. This leaves Ignat in distress, doubting her capabilities as she also doesn't know how to help in this situation. Unexpectedly, Heinz appears at the balcony, instantly noticing her paleness. He discusses the issue with her like how married couples come up with solutions to their problems. Lady Arabelle is under surveillance by Borgia and is being used in order to squeeze Kahin out of riches. Yet, more than anyone, Ignat knows how hard Arabelle's position is as a mistress, leaving her helpless. Moreover, Ignat informs Heinz about her meeting with Kahin to discuss such matters, but to her surprise, the Grand Duke offers to accompany her. Yet, she does not know that the Grand Duke himself cannot be seen around Neonore. Someone's being possessive. I think you are, Heinz. The day comes when Kahin will be meeting Ignat, and this time with Heinz, the Grand Duke included. Heinz, Lena, Grick, and Ignat arrive at the location of the meeting, but what surprises them is Heinz in his battlefield uniform, which they cannot recognize as a suit since not one of them has ever really been into battle before. To them, it seems to be an extravagant uniform that seems to overwhelm Ignat as she speaks with Heinz as his own proxy. She then asks for his name since she has not even asked for it, and so Grand Duke tells her to call him Hertz. Oh boy, you might as well sabotage your own disguise with that name, Grand Duke Ascalon. Anyway, Ignat and the Grand Duke enter the cafe as Kahin welcomes them, confused. Jealous of the man beside Ignat, he asks who Heinz might be, and Ignat finally reveals that she's married, devastating Cahin's heart knowing that his fated woman is actually married. Heinz is having an ominous expression in his face with Cahin's audacity to try stealing his wife. More importantly, Ignat breaks it to Cahin about his sister's situation, which causes him to furiously walk away. But before he can even get out of the cafe, Heinz stops him with his words, hitting his every nerve on how unprepared he is to just fight for his sister head-on. Hence, they all calm down and plan out how to save Arabelle from Baron Cast and the merchant group. Ignat wonders about the poison Cast has given her in the past. Perhaps a bitter taste of his own doing, she considers. The atmosphere grows heavy as Ignat tries to wipe away Cahin's tears while he recounts his past. Seeing this, Hertz quickly snatches his wife's handkerchief and offers it to Cahin, a subtle display of jealousy. How cute! Going back to their topic, Ignat asks Cahin about his deal with Borgia. As mentioned before, his father opened up a port in the east as part of his sister's dowry. His father had gone great lengths to make sure that the Baron group wouldn't be paying any taxes. However, since a scheme like this isn't easily done, Ignat gets intrigued on how he pulled it off. Cahin apparently has connections. Connections that were acquired ever since he took over his father's position of being the Lord. Both Hertz and Ignat are shocked to hear this news. They can't imagine a bastard's child could actually become a lord. Later on, Ignat realizes that the port in question is the Laint region. Memories from her past life surface. She recalls sending correspondence to the east during a trade embargo. Every reply was a resounding rejection. She had no idea that Cahin was on the other end of those messages. Ignat proposes divorce as the safest way for Arabelle to escape. She urges Cahin to encourage his sister to go for it, but the problem is, Cast might not let her go that easily. Quick on his feet, Hertz suggests that he can tell them about altering the remission of taxes if they would file for a divorce, but that wouldn't be in Cahin's favor. As part of their suggestions, Ignat comes up with a plan, one involving Hertz. Ignat thinks back to a memory of a deal being struck. She recounts that day when Borgia said they would be hosting a party. That would be in 2 days' time and at Cast's home, too. The deal that Cahin made was to spend time with his sister, just the two of them, away from everyone's prying. This would be the only time for them to get a chance to talk with Arabelle. That night, Hertz asks her if she's being serious in infiltrating Cast's house just to help Arabelle, a total stranger to her. Without a second thought, Ignat deliberately affirms. She empathizes with Arabelle. Thinking of herself in her past life, she sees Arabelle and herself having similar experiences. Arabelle must have been through a lot for Ignat to actually want to help her. She must help her no matter what. After a while of rummaging through her mother's invitations, the two finally finish searching for the invitation to Cast's party. But all of a sudden, they overhear someone approaching the room. Both of them scurry to hide in a corner. Turns out it was Ignat's father and mother approaching. The two engage in a heated argument, something about the missing payment that the Emperor gave Ignat's father for marrying Ignat to the Grand Duke. Ignat and Hertz listen to the awful conversation between her parents, talking about how they only use their own daughter for their benefit. Listening to them, Ignat cries and trembles as the argument becomes more intense. Worried, Hertz covers Ignat's ears, not wanting his wife to listen to such demeaning things from her parents. Wrapping his arms around her, Hertz hugged poor Ignat in comfort. The argument grows more heated as they both continue to yell at each other. When it settles down, Ignat retreats to her room. Noticing her distress, Hertz asks how she is at the moment. She reveals her feelings about everything, her parents' argument, and including the revelation of her not their biological daughter. The pieces of her past finally align, explaining the indifferent treatment she always received. When Hertz asks her if she would rather prefer to truly be related to Duke Herkia, she pauses. It never did occur to her to think about that before. Lowering himself to meet her gaze, Hertz emphasizes that she must not be sad for not being a member of the Herkia family. Rather, she could find joy in it instead. Hearing his words, Ignat realizes that she's been blaming herself for being undeserving of her parents' love. It turns out, it wasn't her all along. They simply just had a reason behind their lack of affection. The two gaze into each other's eyes, but time is running out. Hertz needs to go back. Although he's leaving her behind for now, he promises to come back in 2 days for the party. Meanwhile, that night at the Grand Duke's quarters, he instructs Kane to prepare a complete guest list of everyone attending the party at Baron's estate. He makes sure to keep everyone at arm's length, ensuring his own identity remains concealed. The Grand Duke doesn't dismiss Cain right away. Instead, he gives him an additional task: to gather information of when Duke Herkia debuted his daughter into society. Ooh, the Grand Duke is cooking! As soon as Cain leaves, a strange glow emanates from the Grand Duke's sword, followed by a voice. It comments on Ignit and her lack of connection to the Emperor. However, nothing is Ignit's fault, as the Grand Duke suspects that she was only a pawn in this game of power. Being left with no choice, Hertz, who is actually the Grand Duke, plans to reveal his true identity to his wife Ignit. 2 days later, on the day of the party, Ignit is found staring into space blankly, refusing to eat or drink. Grick and Lena immediately go to cheer her up. They make haste to prepare her for the party, even hyping up the gorgeous dress Vanessa had made for her. Will that be enough to lift her spirits up? The two can only hope so. A stunning Ignit is all dolled up for the party. Lena and Isaac praise her outstanding charm and beauty. Even the necklace that the Grand Duke Ascalon gave her seems to have found a place in Ignit's fancy outfit. Outside, Hertz stands before the carriage, his presence radiating charm and confidence. Seeing his handsome frame, Ignit's heart skips a beat. Of course you'll feel that way. It's your husband, Ignit! Taking Ignit's hand in his own, Hertz places a gentle kiss on the back of her hand, a romantic gesture reserved only for her. This causes Ignit to blush profusely, unable to hide her flustered feelings. While in the carriage, Ignit braces herself to talk about the events 2 nights before. She reveals her true feelings about her parents' secret, and she expresses her anger and sadness over their betrayal. Her pain now becomes a source of motivation for her renewed vigor. With fixed resolve, she vows to finally forget about it and move on. Hearing her sound so determined, Hertz commends her strength and resilience. He reassures her that everything will be all right soon, subtly hinting at the truth that will soon be revealed. Upon their arrival at the party, the announcer introduces the Grand Duke and Duchess Ascalon, and all eyes fixate on them. From afar, Ignit sees Cast, no doubt with Airbell by his side. Cast looks visibly upset, likely angered by Cahin's presence and the Duke and Duchess's unexpected arrival. Ignit's eyes blaze with anger and eagerness to bring Cast down with her own hands. She wastes no time and directly goes to Airbell. Cast seems to be surprised as to how Ignit knows his wife. Without missing a beat, Ignit explains that she recently assisted Airbell in communicating with the Barons. She emphasizes her previous anonymity and her surprise at being invited to the party. As the party progresses, the team sets their plan in motion. Ignit poses as an immature noble, diverting everyone's attention so that Cahin gets a chance to scout for Cast's butler. After the first song, Cast will undoubtedly let his guard down, a perfect moment for Cahin to cause a scene. This forces Cast's butler to step in and assist Cahin, thus eliminating him from the scene. With the butler and Cahin gone, Hertz and Ignit leap into action. The plan works as expected, leaving Cahin in the other room pretending to be wasted. According to their plan, the situation would leave the butler alone in the hallway, possessing with him keys to all rooms in Cast's home. Hertz successfully incapacitates the butler and retrieves the keys. Ignit and Hertz manage to enter the Cast's office, but Hertz is somehow curious as to how Ignit found Cast's office when she had never been there before. Getting back on track, they both try to find the merchant's ledger. They'll be using the ledger to find discrepancies among the records and use it to get the upper hand. But there's always a possibility that Cast might search for the missing ledger. A valid point, but Ignit tells Hertz not to worry until then. After all, Cast would do anything for his personal gain, so he'd suspect the butler first. As they grab hold of the principal ledger, they both try to read the contents of the ledger, and to their surprise, they find out about several meetings and negotiations done in Nymph's hideaway restaurant. Ignit instructs Hertz to take the ledger to the carriage while she signals Cahin. As Ignit and Hertz part ways, a menacing and ominous aura looms over Hertz. He can't help but feel a growing unease. He only knows so little about his wife Ignit. He begins to suspect that she may have a hidden agenda, that their actions are merely a part of her larger plan. Trying his best to remain unseen, he observes Ignit in her quarters. Haunted by past betrayals, he struggles to fully trust her. Poor Hertz, but it's understandable that he'd keep his guard up. As he prepares to leave, he hears someone approaching Ignit's room. The door opens and he becomes wide-eyed at the scene before him. Luther Herkia, Ignit's father, comes into the room, fuming and bringing down a forceful hand onto his daughter's cheek. A resounding slap burns her cheek red. What could Ignit have done to provoke his wrath? Luther Herkia has just read a letter from Grand Duke Ascalon informing him that the money intended for him has been transferred to Ignit's account. He's more than furious. In her room, Duke Luther takes out his anger on Ignit with no remorse. Hertz, watching from the balcony, struggles to contain his own fury. Ignit feigns ignorance of the transferred funds, prompting Luther to realize his mistake. She confronts him with accusations, backing him into a corner. He raises his hand, ready to strike her again, but he hesitates. Luther recalls Ignit's desperate need for love and attention. He uses her weakness to his advantage, believing that she will willingly surrender the money if he appeases her. Luther turns to leave the room, but before doing so, he congratulates her for her recent wedding and apologizes. Hearing an apology from her illegitimate father, she thinks it's a little too late. With all the pain he's inflicted to her from her previous life, no apology could ever ease her. Hertz watches Ignit sleep, and he realizes how much struggle she had to endure. Yet she still helps people despite her situation. He can only think of wanting to get to know her better. The next morning, Cahin and Hertz meet Ignit to continue the plans they have been plotting. Ignit gets straight to the point, discussing how they would use the ledger and cut off the merchant's ties to others. Naturally, Cahin is assigned a role in all of this. He must do anything to cut caste off from everyone, even if it means paying off penalties. Cahin is weak at the thought of doing so. It's just too much money. However, Ignit has a plan. She wants Cahin to transfer the deal with caste to her instead. She wants to build a merchant group and pay the penalties. She hands him a contract she drafted, leaving Cahin in shock and disbelief. Along with these, she further impresses them by including an investment proposal that extends to the Grand Duke himself. She gives it to Hertz in hopes that he may deliver it to the Grand Duke. Ignit then commands both of them to follow her, as she will show the both of them how she uses the mana stones she received from the Grand Duke to prove her worth. Ignit, go girl! Ignit leads her way to the shop she purchased days ago. Cahin and Hertz are stunned by what they're seeing. Life-size mannequins with unique clothes are displayed inside. The three of them continue to walk through the store until they reach the place where the mana stones are stored. It turns out, the mana stones the Grand Duke gave her were used to control the temperature and humidity of the store. Cahin, impressed, insists on seeing his sister. Ignit stops him, emphasizing the need for their continued cooperation. Later on, Arabelle and Cahin finally meet, but an interpreter is present, infuriating Cahin. He demands that the interpreter leave, allowing for a private conversation with his sister. On the other hand, Ignit and Hertz discuss matters of their own. He is still in shock as to how Ignit managed to use the mana stones to improve the lives of people instead of using them for ill intent. Ignit, in turn, compliments Hertz on his appearance, voice, and demeanor, leaving him momentarily speechless. Cahin and Arabelle rejoin them. Ignit directly explains to Arabelle how the secrets uncovered at the nymph's hideaway will be crucial to her escape and freedom. Arabelle can't fathom how thankful she is to Ignit for giving her hope to save herself from the situation she's in. Yes, Ignit is in the house. The four of them head to the nymph hideaway, only to be blocked by the restaurant's receptionist. The restaurant is by reservation only, but Ignit has a card up her sleeve. Would they still deny her entry when she brought Arabelle with her? After all, Arabelle is none other than the owner of the restaurant itself. The receptionist is in shock as he learns that it is indeed the Baron's mistress. With Arabelle's presence, they are granted free access to the restaurant and they waste no time to proceed with their plan. Ignit is introduced as Arabelle's personal interpreter, and Cahin her bodyguard. Determination stirs within Ignit. She is determined to reveal all the evil lurking under this restaurant's roof. They pretend to be impressed by the restaurant, urging the receptionist to show them around. The receptionist, eager to please, leads them to various areas, unknowingly falling for their plan. Ignit recalls her own struggles under caste's rule, where even minor profit losses resulted in severe punishments. She vividly remembers the hunger and the constant need to endure caste's immoral demands. How cruel he is! Upon their insistence, they break the receptionist's kind bluff, forcing him to show them what truly lies within the restaurant. Left with no choice, he leads them to the merchandise. Young girls in nude, locked up in a prison! The sight before them leaves them stricken with shock and pity as they witness the horrible situation these poor girls have been in. Arabelle, unable to contain her emotions, rushes out of the prison with Cahin. She realizes the extent of caste depravity, the exploitation of women, and her own tragic role as his personal plaything. In tears, Arbel feels hopeless as she sees and realizes everything. Sharing her sentiments, Ignit assures her that they would make everything right. Meanwhile, in the Grand Duke's quarters, Kane comes back from his task of uncovering Ignit's past. It turns out, it took the Duke and Duchess 4 years to announce Ignit's birth. Rumors quickly spread that she was an illegitimate child, but the Duchess cleared it up by saying Ignit was a sickly child. They had to shelter her. Kane and Grand Duke Ascalon are intrigued by the information. Before Kane leaves, he notices Ascalon's intense interest in Ignit and her past. Without hesitation, he admits to suspecting a budding romance between the two, leaving the Duke to look up at him as if caught red-handed. Kane's words implying the Grand Duke being in love left a terrible mark on Hertz. The word love seems to be complex to him. Despite his reservations, the Sword agrees with Kane's assessment. He acknowledges a growing affection for Ignit, but recognizes that their positions and the constraints imposed upon them by those above them prevent him from fully embracing his feelings. Meanwhile, Kahin, Arbel, and Ignit regroup and talk about what they just witnessed. Prostitution in their country is not illegal, which explains why people in the restaurant act normal upon seeing those girls. Even if they report it to the higher-ups, caste might still pull strings and get away only by paying the penalty or a fine. The siblings badly want to help the helpless girls, but freeing them would only make things worse. Concentrating hard, Ignit plans to corner caste in a way that he wouldn't be able to escape. Soon, they will get the chance to get rid of him for good. Later that night, Ignit sneaks out of the estate. However, she is found by Sir Grick, upon whose insistence manages to accompany her to the store that Isaac manages. Ignit asks Isaac regarding their family's previous business, offering services for the acquisition of any intelligence. Isaac doesn't deny this, but he tells her that those services were mainly Calvain's expertise. He was part of the Bakun's family, who had skills in acquiring information from anything and anyone. But the thing is, Calvain blames himself for their family's demise. Even with this, Ignit insists to meet Calvain. He's the only one she can trust to help her find her birth parents. Please help her, Calvain. In the Grand Duke's residence, he is known as Heinz. Today, Heinz's father comes to meet him. Darting towards him, his father attempts to embrace, only to be ignored by his own son. As they dine together, he reflects on the complexities of family dynamics. He observes that a parent's lack of love for their child can have profound consequences. He draws a parallel to Ignit and her mother's strained relationship, recalling the indifferent treatment he witnessed at their wedding. Dismissing his father, he opens a topic of wanting to have his wife by his side after the monostone mining is finished. His father, aware of Luther Herkia's greed and his demands for money upon Ignit's marriage, assumes Ignit has inherited these traits. However, Heinz vehemently defends her from his father. Once more, Heinz makes his intentions known of bringing Ignit back to the residence, regardless of what his father says. Meanwhile, in another part of the country, Ignit persists in meeting with Calvain. She wants to know her origins and how she ended up at the Herkia family. Calvain tries to deny her request, but try as he may, it becomes futile because Ignit finds a way to bribe him. The promise of the collapse of the Baron's merchant group, the man he despises most, is enough to sway Calvain. Inside the carriage, Sir Grick praises Ignit for how she managed to change after the marriage. He had said that it was as if she was always outside trying to look in, but that's certainly not the case now. Their conversation comes to a halt as they arrive. Sir Grick brings up the thought of having the name Nettie as the shop's name, a short name for Ignit. Hearing this, she beams with delight as she considers his suggestion. That's a cute name, though. Later on, Hertz, aka Heinz, arrives with good news. One that leaves Ignit beaming with joy and disbelief. It turns out the Grand Duke apparently accepted Ignit's proposal. He was more than willing to have her shop and merchant group contribute to the whole empire and help the commerce to the east. With everything going in her favor, what would Ignit accomplish next? So guys, what do you think of this story so far? Please subscribe and turn on notifications for updates on this and all our other stories, so you can be the first to find out when they're out. Thank you so much for your support. See you in the next one!